Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jason Cogdell, and I'm one of two benefits attorneys at ProBenefits. And on behalf of myself and Laura Bibb and the entire ProBenefits team, best wishes to you all. Hope your open enrollment season is going well. For those of you working on calendar year plans and renewals, for those of you excited about the holidays like we are, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you. This has been a great year, and on behalf of our team, we want to thank you for what has been record attendance at our webinars this year. This is our 10th session of 2018, and we've had a good time doing it. And our continuing goal as we seek to raise the level of compliance and elevate compliance for our employer clients and advisor clients is to provide you content that is timely, content that is helpful and practical, and address a number of topics and benefits, both that those that relate directly to what we may do for your organization, like Section 125 or HRA or COBRA, or other matters as well, to help you as much as possible. So your continuing feedback is welcome. We've absorbed the feedback from our recent webinar survey, and part of this session and some of the sessions in early 2019 will reflect that feedback. But we appreciate your engagement in our webinars and look forward to continue to provide these in 2019. This session is our traditional end of the year session, where we like to talk about what is important to know at the end of the year and for calendar year plans that may be renewing right now, or 12/1 or 2/1 plans that might be renewing right now, and then also look ahead to 2019 and provide a copy of our new annual benefits compliance checklist for employers. So we'll do all of that today, and this won't be a long extended webinar. Your questions, as always, are welcome in the question box, and I will have some time after I finish the formal presentation to answer questions in writing through the question box, and I'll mention that when we get there. I thought it may be helpful to provide a big picture, 30,000-foot view of where we stand in benefits right now relative to the ACA and other items, to do a refresher on some open enrollment considerations, and then discuss 2019. So I'll spend less time on 2019 than the here and now, but we'll hopefully cover a little bit of everything. And again, your questions are welcome. And to confirm, everyone who registered for the session today, whether someone who's attending live at this moment or not, will receive a copy of the session recording, which is YouTube format with audio and slides, a copy of the slides in PDF, and a copy of the 2019 benefits compliance checklist. Also, when I get to the compliance checklist, for those of you who want to see it during the session, there is a PDF linked in the handouts section of the control panel. So under handouts is a copy in PDF of the benefits compliance checklist. You can access there as well. Now, where do we stand after all of the activity, all of the discussion, all of the news over the last couple of years? Where do we stand relative to the Affordable Care Act? The key phrase, and one that I've said way too many times over the past 2 years, is that the ACA remains the law of the land. So on December the 5th, 2018, and on the brink of 2019, the Affordable Care remains in full force and effect, the same way it was when it went into effect on March the 23rd of 2010. A reality check there is that as we go into 2019, which will be the 10th year of the Affordable Care Act, that we've lived with this for an entire decade. So I think it bears acknowledgement that this is not something new. This is not a trend. This is not a passing situation. This is reality of the American healthcare landscape. And even though the Republicans have controlled both houses of Congress and the White House in the last 2 years, the law was not significantly modified. So the ACA, with minor exceptions, is in the same condition it was today, and as the new Congress takes its seat in 2019, as it was when President Obama signed it into law in March of 2010. So I think it's important to acknowledge that, and a lot of the old jokes that the ACA is like the weather in Scotland. If you don't like it, just wait 24 hours and it will change. Or the jokes about how you couldn't count on anything with the ACA because it would change quickly and whatnot. Those jokes are old and they're tired, and no one's laughed at them in 5+ years because they're not true anymore. The ACA doesn't change on a regular basis these days. All major provisions have gone into effect. And oh, by the way, the IRS is enforcing, the DOL is enforcing, HHS is enforcing provisions of the Affordable Care Act. So it's no longer a laughing matter. It's reality of the American healthcare and benefits system. The only item left to go into effect that hasn't already is the so-called Cadillac tax. And listed there as 2020. It's actually 2022. That's a mistake on the slide there. The Cadillac tax, as it's currently written, would go into effect in 2022. I don't expect it to go into effect in its current form, and most likely it will be either further delayed or modified. But that's the only thing. Everything else has gone into effect, and there are no major changes for 2019, with one exception, and that is you may have read that whereas the individual tax mandate, the requirement that you and me and our spouses and neighbors and parents and children and everybody but pets either get health insurance and keep it for the tax year or pay a tax penalty. That's been in effect since 2014, nothing new, except that as part of the tax law that was passed at this time last year before Christmas, the penalty for 2019 goes to zero. So the individual mandate wasn't technically repealed, but the maximum penalty goes to zero. So what that means is after 2018, the tax mandate does apply for 2018, and individuals that didn't have health coverage during 2018 will either have to qualify for an exemption or they'll pay the penalty when they do their 2018 individual or joint tax filings. So that is still in effect, no changes for 2018. But as we move into 2019, there's no longer a potential tax penalty if someone does not have health coverage during the year in 2019. Will that have an impact on group enrollment? I don't know. Certainly don't expect anything significant. Will it have an effect on the overall insurance market? It should, but we'll see what happens. So that is kind of the biggest change. It's not a group level change. It won't probably have any significant impact on your employee benefit programs, but that is a change that will affect us as individuals. So the question will still be on the tax return, both for 2018 and 2019, but beginning in 2019, there won't be a tax penalty if someone doesn't have health coverage. So that's the biggest ACA related change, even though it won't affect your health program. Now, that's where we are today. What is the chance of further modification or repeal or change relative to the ACA in 2019, 2020? Frankly, I don't know. It certainly doesn't seem, with the Democrats taking control of the House of Representatives and Congress being split, a Democratic House and a Republican Senate, with obviously a Republican president, it doesn't seem like Congress and the administration will be able to tackle ACA repeal, but anything is possible. And just as it has been a surprise that the Republicans weren't able to accomplish anything relative to the ACA the last 2 years, anything could happen for the next 2 years and beyond. So that's where we stand. So anything could happen, but I think it's probably a reasonable assumption that the ACA will stay in place for some length of time, ranging from the next 2 years to forever. But anything's happened, so we'll continue to see where that goes. But that's a quick word about the status of the ACA as we end 2018 and go into 2019. Now, end of the year compliance items. Good news here is that there are no automatic end of year compliance deadlines that are tied to the calendar year. So there's nothing due for the average employer. Nothing is due, reporting or otherwise, on 12/31. So that's good, particularly for those of you that are already dealing with enough with open enrollment. And the next compliance deadlines are into 2019. So really the end of the year compliance items for your checklist are those that relate to open enrollment if you're a 12/1/11 plan rather than something necessitated by the government. For example, as listed on the first bullet point on the slide, if I have calendar year benefit renewal and my benefit plans are renewing 1/1, then certainly I want to make sure that any SPD updates or distribution that I need to do takes place at or after open enrollment. Same thing with the SBC, the summary of benefits and coverage that applies to the major medical health plan or an HRA health plan. I want to take care of those items around open enrollment, take care of any required notices that I need to provide to plan participants or other employees. But that's triggered by open enrollment, not the expiration of the calendar year. Now, looking ahead into 2019, the first compliance deadline for 2019 would have been the distribution of the Form 1095-C for applicable large employers, or 1095-B for small employers that sponsored a self-funded plan in 2018, as the ACA reporting deadlines kick off again. And on paper, those deadlines are the same as W-2 and W-3. That obviously, the W-2s are supposed to be issued to employees by the end of January, and then the W-3 summary goes to the IRS by the end of February with copies of all the W-2s. Well, the reporting is on the same deadline. But last week, the IRS announced the extension of the distribution deadline for the 1095-C and 1095-B from January 31st to now March the 4th. So that gives employers an entire month additional and a month past the W-2 deadline to get out those 1095-Cs, which go to for applicable large employers, they go to any employee that had full-time status for all or part of 2018. And then for any employer that is not an ALE, not subject to the mandate, but did sponsor a self-funded plan or a level-funded plan for all or part of 2018, that employer needs to provide the 1095-B, as in beta, to anyone that had health coverage for at least 1 month in 2018. So that is the deadline that was extended to March the 4th. Now, the other deadlines, the deadlines that the employers have to provide, or the carriers have to provide the summary, the 1094-C or the 1094-B to the IRS, that deadline was not delayed. So employers that have to file a 1094-C or a 1094-B to the IRS, those requirements kick in 2/28 in their file, 2/28 if in hard copy, or April the 1st if electronic. So we've got one delay, and that'll push the first ACA reporting deadlines out to the end of February, and for many employers out to the end of March. So that's good. That'll give you a little extra breathing room in early 2019. So I wanted to let you know about that if you hadn't already. And then after that, really the next major deadline, again, that's not associated with open enrollment, is July 31st. And July 31st is when PCOR fees are due for major medical plans or HRAs that ended in 2018. You always pay the fee in the calendar year after the plan year ends. So any plan that ended in 2018, any time in 2018, PCOR fee will be paid by July 31st of 2019. Calendar year 5500s are due July 31st as well. Non-calendar plans are due 7 months after the end of the plan year. So anyway, the good news here is there are no automatic deadlines for 1231, and there's a delay by 1 month of a key ACA reporting deadline that applies to applicable large employers, and the other compliance deadlines are a ways in the future. So there will be a little breathing room for most plans after the beginning of the year. So just want to confirm that. Now, since I mentioned open enrollment, and since many of you employers have been dealing with 12/1 or 1/1 renewal of one or more of your benefit plans, and those of you advisors certainly in the thick of the frenzy of open enrollment season, as so many benefit plans are on a 12/1 or 1/1 basis. So just want to recap what's important in open enrollment. Obviously, what's most important in open enrollment is that the benefit options are adequately and correctly communicated to eligible employees. And that's, kind of the blocking and tackling of open enrollment, and what takes a lot of time with regard to picking the plan design, deciding who's eligible, and offering those individuals a chance to participate or not participate for the upcoming plan year. So that's to be acknowledged before we get into the next 6 best practice points for open enrollment. The first practice point is, and this has been a continuing priority throughout the ACA era, is for employers to document all elections and waivers, whether that's hard copy, whether that's electronic, with online enrollment for your eligible employees. Documenting elections and waivers is critical. Is it legally required? No. For example, I get the question all the time, is it legally required that we get a hard copy signed waiver from every individual? No, it's not legally required. The carrier may or may not require it. It's not legally required, but it is absolutely the best practice, and every employer should do it. because if you get challenged later by an individual about whether or not he or she was offered coverage, for example, in a potential penalty scenario with the employer mandate, the best evidence that that person was offered coverage and waived the coverage would be a signed waiver, signed meaning in hard copy or acknowledged online. There are various ways to create records around election and waivers, but employers should have an effective way to do that for the current, past, and future plan years in order to fully protect the plan and the rights of the employer. Second, COBRA. While not a popular topic and unfortunately a common compliance mistake, employers that are subject to COBRA, those that have 20 or more employees, need to remember that COBRA participants do have open enrollment rights. So if you have someone who's newly eligible for COBRA or a continuing COBRA participant through the open enrollment period, that individual needs to be provided information relative to the new rates for the plan year and any new plan options that may be available. As a COBRA administrator, one thing we do for COBRA participants is send them an open enrollment notice that includes the new rates. Generally, it's up to the employer if they want to send an open enrollment packet, similar to what you do for regular active employees to the COBRA participants. That's probably a best practice to do that. Not all employers do it, but it is an option and something that may be worth considering. But COBRA participants do have open enrollment rights, and employers need to remember that. And if you have any questions about that, let us know. Section 125 plan. Are you up to date with your SPD? We sent out a compliance alert recently about 125 documents. Do you have a document? Do you know where it is? Are all the benefits that are eligible for pre-tax deductions by employees included in that document? HSA, dental, vision, medical, FSA, otherwise, is it in the document? If you've added new benefits or if you've changed eligibility, getting that Section 125 plan up to date is key. One thing we're heavily involved in, our compliance team during open enrollment, is updating documents. And we're doing a lot of document updates right now, seeing what plan changes have been made and getting the new SPDs to the employer so that the employer may distribute those. If you have any questions about that, let us know. If you can't locate your Section 125 plan and you need to get something in writing and updated, let us know. That's a key part of what we do for employers, and we'll be happy to help you. I mentioned earlier the SBC requirement provided at enrollment. There are other required notices and disclosures. In fact, our last webinar in mid-October was on required notices and disclosures by employers. And if you'd like to have a copy of that session, we'll be happy to provide it to you. I think it's also linked from the webinar page on our website, and I won't go into any more detail on that now. And then if you, employer, have put in any new benefits, or you've made any significant eligibility changes for this enrollment. Does the new benefit have an SPD? Is it described in writing? Have you done what you need to do as far as distributing an SPD to employees? If you've made eligibility changes, have the SPDs been updated? Have you made consistent changes in your materials and other things? That's kind of the sixth best practice point there. So I just want to let you know about that. So those are my thoughts about open enrollment. Again, we'll make a copy of these slides available to you because as I go into the next couple of slides, recent developments, and in case you missed it, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these individual items. If you would like to read more about any of them, let us know. You can just respond to the webinar email. We'll be happy to provide you some more information. I just want to let you know about these. I won't go into great detail right now in the interest of time. But as far as some recent developments, and in case you missed it, first of all, as we look into 2019, the IRS has finally announced the remaining limits for 2019. Many were announced back in April and May, but several, including the Health FSA limit for 2019, had not yet been announced until 2 weeks ago. The Health FSA limit is going to be $2,700, which is a $50 increase over 2018. So any Health FSA plan year that begins 1/1 or later can take advantage of the $2,700 limit. Again, this is a limit only on employee contributions. Any employer contributions can be made in excess of this limit. And importantly, it only applies to plans that begin in 2019. So any plan that renewed 12/1, for example, is subject to the 2018 max, which is $2,650. As far as other limits, and bear with me here as I switch over for a moment. to the list. This is a blog post that was linked from our recent update about the Health FSA Max, and this blog post includes all of the 2019 maxes just in one place for cafeteria plans, Health FSAs, dependent care, highly compensated employees for testing purposes, HSAs, ACA maxes, HRA maxes, and transit for 2019. So this is a page from our website. If you received our blast and update regarding the Health FSA Max, this was linked from that. I just want to let you know about that if you want to confirm any other maximums that you're not aware of for 2019. Otherwise, recent developments, the biggest story in employee benefits is that the IRS continues to enforce player pay. Last November, the IRS started enforcement of player pay back to the first year, which was 2015, and that's been what the IRS has focused on for the last 12 months. Yes, employers are getting penalty notices. Yes, some employers are having to pay penalties. Other employers are able to defeat the penalty on appeal because maybe the IRS information about the penalty was incorrect, or maybe the employer just did the reporting incorrectly and the employer is able to correct the reporting and then avoid the penalty. But many employers are being assessed penalties and paying penalties for 2015, and a lot of that's happened over the last 12 months. Last month, in November, the IRS started enforcement of 2016. Many more employers will get penalty notices for 2016 than 2015 because 2016 was the first year that the mandate applied not just to over 100 employers, but over 50. So for 2016 and 17 and 18, more employers will receive penalty notices. If you're an employer over 50 and you've been subject to the reporting, just know that you may get a letter from the IRS. It may say that you owe a penalty. You may owe a penalty. You may not owe a penalty. You may have to appeal the penalty. There's an option to appeal, and many employers are successful in doing so. But just know that this letter may come. And if it does come, don't panic. Take a deep breath. Start to form a battle plan on how to respond to the IRS and either have the penalty reduced or eliminated. But just be aware that those letters, which are IRS letter 226J, are going to employers. And this is part of the mandate enforcement, which will continue. The IRS is also sending separate letters for employers that didn't do the ACA reporting that maybe should have. And that's another separate process that's going on right now. But this is a big deal. So if you're an employer and you haven't gotten a letter, fantastic. If you're a small employer, you're not subject to the mandate, congratulations. If you're not a small employer, you are subject to mandate and you haven't gotten a letter, just know that you may get one, even if it's an error. And that has happened, but just know that this is going on, that employers are dealing with this, and this will be a topic of serious consideration for the next few years. Finally, I mentioned the individual mandate still does apply for 2018 before it is reduced to zero for 2019. The IRS has recently announced 4 new hardship exemptions that will apply to 2018 that may help some people avoid the penalty. Next slide. I mentioned earlier the ACA reporting deadlines. Here's just a very quick summary, and I'm not going to get into this in detail. Hopefully, you as employers know whether you're subject to the reporting or not. If you would like a one-page summary of what employers have to report, what forms are due, and when, let us know, and we'll provide that one-page summary to you. We also have additional materials, including a reference guide for Form 1095-C, if any of that would be helpful to you. In the interest of time, I'm not going to get into any more detail on ACA reporting details, but just know that that's a big deal. The forms haven't really changed for 2018, so the process is going to be roughly the same that it was last year, but those deadlines are quick approaching, so of course we want to know about them and be ready. For those of you that have to pay PCOR fees, either because you sponsor a self-funded health plan or sponsor an HRA, the PCOR fee has been confirmed. The fee that will be paid July 31st of 2019 for the 2018 plan year ends, and the fee is listed there. That penalty has gone up by a small amount since it started at $2 per year, and we only have 2 more rounds of PCOR fees. In 2019, the 2018 fee will be paid, and then when the 2019 plan year ends are paid in 2020, the PCOR fee goes away. So several of the other fees, including that painful required contribution to reinsurance fee that applied for 2014, 15, and 16, several other fees have expired or have been suspended, but this fee does continue for 2 more rounds. So I want to let you know about that. And if anybody wants a summary on PCOR fees, we'll be happy to provide that. Many of you know about and provide the FLSA marketplace notice to new hires. This is the notice that says whether or not the employer offers health coverage and whether or not employees may be eligible to go to the marketplace and get a premium subsidy. The FLSA marketplace notice has to be given to all new hires within 14 days, and the DOL just updated the template. So you should be able to find that online just by searching DOL FLSA notice, but if you can't find it or would like a link to the notice, we'll be happy to provide that. Otherwise, a couple of other bullet points there I'm not going to get into as guidance continues on several new topics, including short-term health plans and association plans and potential HRA expansion. Those are items that are coming out of an executive order from the president that was issued 13 months ago, and the DOL has responded over time. These are things that we're going to hear more about in 2019, and you'll read more about as options for individuals and potential option for small employers and others, but nothing else that requires our time today. Take a quick look at some questions, and again, if you have any additional questions, you're welcome to submit them, and I'll get to them either now or after we finish. One good question relates to both SPDs, SBCs, and other required notices, and the question is, can those notices be distributed to participants by email or by posting on a benefits portal? The answer to that is yes. The DOL rules do allow electronic distribution, but with certain qualifications. One of those is that before an employer starts to distribute notices or SPDs to employees, and I got one question about COBRA participants, so the same analysis would apply to COBRA participants, that before you start distributing electronically in any format, you're supposed to get a signed acknowledgement or confirmation from the participant. So that's certainly what I would recommend. But yes, electronic distribution of SPDs, SBCs, and other items is available. Another question, with the individual mandate going to 0 for 2019, would that be a qualifying event for someone who's in a non-calendar health plan that's not under open enrollment? Effectively, yes. The removal of the individual mandate by itself is not a qualifying event, but the marketplace open enrollment is a qualifying event. So while the qualifying event rules haven't been updated to include that, I think by extension, some of the marketplace qualifying events, could be used by an employer if it wishes to allow that change. I think we'll probably get some kind of clarifying guidance on that soon, but I haven't seen anything so far on that. Another quick question, back to the election and waivers for open enrollment. When we document elections and waivers, can that be documented simply by creating a list from the electronic or benefits portal of who logged in, who enrolled, who waived, who failed to respond, maybe who did not log in? Can we just create a list and use that as our annual evidence? Absolutely. I think any reliable evidence of who enrolled or didn't enroll, who didn't even respond, I think any of that would be fine for purposes of protecting the plan. Now, in the final few minutes, just looking ahead to some 2019 compliance items, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, and we'll address certain items as we go into the webinars in 2019. But I don't think you'll be surprised by the top 4. No real surprises, and I think to some extent 2019 should look a little bit like 2018 in some respects, in terms of no new items that employers need to do as of yet. Certainly anything could happen in 2019 with Congress or the agencies, but it seems like the top 3 compliance items for 2019 will look a little bit like 2018. ACA compliance and enforcement, by far number 1. COBRA compliance continues to be key. And not only is the DOL enforcing COBRA strictly, there are even some lawsuits in certain jurisdictions regarding COBRA compliance of employers or association plans or otherwise. So COBRA compliance continues to be a big deal. HIPAA privacy and security, we can't go 1 week without reading about some significant privacy breach. Last week it was Marriott, and while most likely that breach was just about privacy information, not necessarily health information that's subject to HIPAA, privacy and security continues to be a big deal, and HIPAA compliance is a big deal. We hosted a HIPAA compliance training session for employers several months ago, and that's available in YouTube format if that would be helpful to anyone. If that is something that your organization has not addressed, whether you're fully insured or self-funded or whether you're an advisor, we would highly recommend that you consider that at some point in 2019. Taxation of benefits continues to be a key topic and will continue to be, making sure that the benefits that are provided are handled correctly for tax purposes, both for your employees as well as your owners, as well as any individuals that may be treated in a certain way, that benefits are handled correctly. And while there's nothing employers need to do directly, 2 things that we think will be hot topics in 2019 will be association plans for small groups and then mental health parity, which continues to be an issue for all group health plans, both fully insured and self-funded. And as we consider 2019, I mentioned that in your handouts is a copy of the 2019 benefits compliance checklist, and I'll put that up on the screen briefly here. This is a 1-page document that's not meant to include everything in the whole world about compliance that an employer could do, but it's meant to address the key ACA items, number 1, and then non-ACA items, number 2, that an employer should be aware of and that most benefit plans may need to address. Now, some items on this list may not apply to your benefits program if you don't have a certain benefit or you're below a certain size. But this is a kind of a one-size-fits-all benefits compliance checklist for employers that we provide on an annual basis. A PDF copy is available there in the handouts tab, as I mentioned, and we'll provide a copy of the PDF with our webinar follow-up as well. So I'm not going to go into detail on any of these items, but we did want you to know that this is available because, as I mentioned at the top of the show, our goal is to help employers and advisors with compliance, both relative to what we do and in a broader sense, because we're all on the same team when it comes to making sure employers are doing what they need to do and taking care of business to protect what's really important, and that is what your business is and the financial assets of that business. Now, with that, I am going to conclude with a brief word about best practices and then move into a Q&A session. And anybody that needs to go from the live session, you're welcome to go at that point. And anyone that would like to stay and either enter a question or see the questions asked by other people is welcome to stay. This is what I'll leave you with for 2019. Best practices, ACA, by far the number 1 compliance issue for employers. Number 1, know whether the employer mandate applies. Did you have 50 or more full-time employees plus equivalents for the 12 calendar months in 2018? If so, the mandate applies for 2019. If not, you may be exempt. Does the reporting apply? Well, you've got to report right now for 2018 if you were an ALE in 2018. You'll have to report for 2019, a year from now, if you're an ALE for 2019. Employers should know, does the reporting apply to me? Am I an applicable large employer, 50 FTE plus FTEs, yes or no? Or did I sponsor a self-funded plan if I was under 50 that triggered a reporting requirement, yes or no? Know whether you're subject to the mandate or not, know whether you have to report or not. And of course, comply with all the plan design requirements. Those that are fully insured, that's being taken care of by the carrier. Those that are self-funded, hopefully your broker and TPA are taking care of the plan design requirements. But you need to be aware of them and be aware that your plan is ACA compliant or not, whether it's grandfathered or not, because if it is, you need to send out a notice. And a brief word to small employers. It continues to be a good time for small employers in one sense, and that is that you have flexibility. If you're not required to offer health coverage and not required to follow the ACA mandate eligibility rules, then you've got some flexibility. If you're not required to comply with affordability, which only applies to applicable large employers, then great, you've got some flexibility as to affordability and what you charge from a premium standpoint for eligible employees. It's speaking as a small employer, it's not a great time to be a small employer in terms of cost. And as a small employer, we have very little negotiating power with the carriers, and our costs continue to escalate, and the challenges continue as far as what type of benefit program we provide to our employees and how much it costs us and costs them. But thankfully, there are some other options to save money in taxes, both in pre-tax payroll deductions through Section 125, flexible spending accounts, health savings accounts, health reimbursement arrangements. And if we can help you regarding your plan design and options that you offer for 2019 or beyond, we'll be happy to do so. But for employers, the ACA remains number one, and I want to make sure to end on that, because despite the fact that the ACA has been around now for almost 9 years, and despite the fact that these items are not in the news on a daily basis like they used to be, this is a big deal. Employers are being penalized, and so it's never been more important to ensure compliance from an ACA perspective and from other fronts as well. And with that, I thank you all for attending, and want to just leave you with the offer to hang around for a few minutes. If you have submitted a question, or if you'd like to, feel free to stay around for a minute. Those of you logging off now, thank you for joining us. Again, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you. Hope everyone has a great rest of the day, and we'll be in touch soon. For those of you hanging around, what I would suggest is that you open the question box on your control panel. You can even undock it and expand it so that you can see all of the replies and not just your own question. And as I go to mute here in a moment, what I'll do is I'll reply all to as many of them as I can, and I'll spend about 5 or 10 minutes answering these questions. So feel free to submit a question if you have not already. If you have, we'll try to get it to you in the next few minutes. If for some reason we do not answer your question, or you have to log off before you see the answer to your question, feel free to respond to the webinar email with your question, and we'll respond to you separately by email. Again, thanks for joining us, guys, and feel free to submit a question.